Hey there everyone, and welcome to my 2023 Stanley Cup Playoffs preview. We've got 2 exciting months of hockey ahead of us. I hope you're excited for this. I think you can tell I am. Let me know in the comments down below, who are you picking to win the Stanley Cup this season, and who's your sleeper team or your dark horse? And if you're following the playoffs to any degree, we're going to be doing live play-by-play audio and reacting to the playoff madness. So if you're new here and you're into that kind of thing, I think you know what to do. Now, to celebrate the playoffs, we're actually running 2 giveaways through the NHL.com bracket challenge. See the timestamp down below. I'll dive into it more there, but here's the gist. Join my bracket challenge. See the link to that in the pinned comment down below. It's totally free to join, and it's through NHL.com. The winner, the person with the highest score who has the most accurate bracket, gets a $50 Cool Hockey gift card, so you can save money on an Adidas NHL jersey. They also have free shipping, so check that out down below. And for the other giveaway, if you become a member by tapping join down below, you could enter our members only bracket challenge for a chance to win an Adidas authentic NHL jersey, a team of your choice. So I'll explain that toward the end of the video, but for now, let's look at the playoffs bracket. So we have 4 quadrants here. Let's look at the Eastern Conference, and on the Atlantic side of things, we have the President's Trophy winning and record setting Boston Bruins taking on the second wild card, the Florida Panthers. We also have the Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the 3 seed, the Tampa Bay Lightning. And in the Metropolitan side of things, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, who won their division, going up against the New York Islanders, the first wild card in the East. Our other matchup features a great rivalry renewed between the New Jersey Devils, the 2 seed, and the 3 seed New York Rangers. In the Western Conference, on the Pacific side of things, we have the Vegas Golden Knights, best regular season record for the Western Conference, going up against the number 2 wild card, the Winnipeg Jets. We also have the 2 seed, the Edmonton Oilers, taking on the 3rd seed, that is the LA Kings. And lastly, in the Central Division quadrant, we have the Colorado Avalanche, who won their division, going up against the first wild card, that is the Seattle Kraken. And we also have the 2 seed, the Dallas Stars, versus the 3 seed, the Minnesota Wild. All right, let's go team by team and break down each of these matchups. If you're newer to the NHL and want an explanation of how the playoffs work, I covered that in a video last year. Just see the pinned comment down below. I'll provide you a link there. Let's get into it, okay? So we're going to have these mini previews starting with the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers, the second wild card. And do note that most of my team stats here reflect 80 or 81 games played, not the full 82, but it's really not going to make much of a difference. All right, the Boston Bruins, how did they get here? They've been just dominant in every major statistical category, every position imaginable, especially when it comes to keeping the puck out of the net, with the likes of Linus Ullmark, who could win the Vezina Trophy this season, and also Jeremy Swayman. They only surrendered 2.10 goals per game. They have a fantastic defensive core, and they added to it with the likes of Dmitry Orlov. At the trade deadline, he's won a Stanley Cup with Washington before. You've got Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm. I think he should get some Norris Trophy consideration because just amazing two-way play from him this whole season long. And from the forward group, they have plenty of depth. You look at somebody like Jake DeBrusk, who bounced back this season. You have Trent Frederick, you have Pavel Zacha, Taylor Hall. But of course, they are led by David Pastrnak. 61 goals and 52 assists. Absolutely lethal on the power play, and also a great playmaker overall too. Now let's get to the Florida Panthers. Now, it took them a long time to really find their mojo with their new coach, Paul Maurice, but down the stretch, they won 6 in a row. They moved up to 5th in the NHL in goals for per game. A huge factor in that was Matthew Tkachuk. He could be in the Hart Trophy conversation as the NHL's MVP. He had 40 goals and 69 assists. And defenseman Brandon Montour, man, he was always a good two-way defenseman, but this season he erupted offensively. 16 goals and 57 assists. But I am curious to see what they do about their goaltending in the postseason. Alex Lyon was leaned on heavily down the stretch to help get them in the playoffs, and he did perform pretty well, even though he's not a number 1 goaltender traditionally. But they will have Sergei Bobrovsky, and I do think he played for them pretty well in the postseason last year. This season, though, he wasn't particularly great. Now, for the regular season series, the Bruins won 2 of those games in regulation. The Panthers won 1 game in regulation, and they also won 1 in overtime. The Bruins outscored the Panthers 17-15 in those 4 games. Sasha Barkov played 3 out of those 4 games for the Panthers. He had 2 goals and 4 assists. Patrice Bergeron had 3 goals and 3 assists. A couple of notable players to watch. Of course, I could talk about all the star players out there, but you guys are familiar with most of them. So I'll actually talk about some guys who you might not necessarily pay as much attention to for a lot of the teams out there, but really Patrice Bergeron for the Bruins, it might be his last postseason run before he hangs him up and goes into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He was a great weapon on the power play this year for the Bruins, 10 goals and 9 assists. And you got to remember, the Panthers had the 25th ranked penalty kill. And you also have to consider a very intriguing matchup between Bergeron and Sasha Barkov. And on the Florida side of things, don't forget Carter Verhaeghe. He actually led the team in goals with 42 this year. Absolutely incredible. And he was clutch as can be in the first round last year against the Capitals with 6 goals and 6 assists in those 6 games, really putting the team on his back. In terms of injuries, I'll do my best with these, although this is changing almost every day. Boston has pretty much everybody healthy at this point, like Taylor Hall recently came back to the lineup. For the Panthers, I am curious to see if Sam Bennett is ready to go in Game 1. He's been out since March 20th and could certainly benefit the team. For the other matchup in the Atlantic, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Maple Leafs, they got some really good goaltending this season, especially from Ilya Samsonov. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to be ready 100% for Game 1, but in 42 games, .919 save percentage, 2.3 goals against average, 4 shutouts, and a great quality start percentage as well, as Toronto's defense improved drastically this season from 19th in goals against to 7th this year. But in the event that he can't go and Matt Murray isn't 100% from his concussions, you've got Joseph Woll. I've never heard of this guy before, but in 7 games with Toronto down the stretch, .932 save percentage, 2.16 goals against average. Mitch Marner has been the MVP of this team, I believe, or at least among the skaters out there. He had 30 goals and 69 assists. The Leafs had the best power play in the Eastern Conference with the likes of Marner, Matthews, Tavares, and Nylander. And don't forget, Tampa actually takes the 4th most penalties in the NHL, so that could be a momentum shifting factor. Also, the Leafs were the 3rd best team in regulation in the NHL with a record of 41-21, or at least heading into their last game. And that's especially relevant when we get into the postseason because overtime is also 5-on-5, just like it is in regulation. As for the Lightning, they did lose 8 out of 12 down the stretch. I wouldn't be overly concerned about them from that sense. You know, this team is resilient as can be, at least over the last few years, having been to the final the past 3 seasons and fought off elimination and that sort of thing. Their team defense did regress. It went from 6th the previous 2 seasons to 15th this year. I don't think that's necessarily attributed to Vasilevsky, but they did miss Ryan McDonough after he got traded to Nashville. Nikita Kucherov, though, we talked about Pasta earlier, David Pasternak, but Kucherov, a fantastic season. He would normally be in that Hart Trophy conversation if it weren't for like McDavid and Draisaitl, but he mostly led the Eastern Conference in scoring throughout the season in terms of goals plus assists. He also had the most power play points out of anybody not on the Edmonton Oilers, Tampa boasting the 5th best power play in the NHL. Now, in terms of the regular season series, the Leafs won twice in regulation. The Lightning won once in overtime, but Toronto outscored Tampa by a margin of 11-8. In those games, Willie Nylander for Toronto had 3 goals and 3 assists, and Mikhail Sergachev, a defenseman for the Bolts, he had a goal and 2 assists. And don't forget, for this season, he actually broke out quite a bit as well with 62 points. As for players to watch that I haven't talked about yet, Ryan O'Reilly for the Toronto Maple Leafs, that was a slam dunk for me because he's won a Stanley Cup before. He's an amazing two-way forward. I know he's kind of slowed down a little bit in terms of productivity, but you need that veteran leadership from somebody like him, especially for a team that hasn't won a playoff series in some time. With the Leafs so far in 12 games, he's got 4 goals and 6 assists. And as for Tampa, I was concerned that after losing Andre Palat to free agency, they would need somebody else to come into the top 6 and provide some firepower, and they got that from Brandon Hagel. 30 goals and 34 assists for 64 points. For the Maple Leafs, I already talked about the goaltending injuries. Erik Gustafsson, a defenseman they acquired at the trade deadline, he did miss a few games. I'm not sure if he's going to be back for Game 1. For the Lightning, Tanner Jeannot, he's going to be at least out for the start of the postseason. Okay, now on to the Metropolitan side of things. We start with the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Islanders. Now, with the Carolina Hurricanes, an excellent defensive core. They ranked 2nd in goals against and 2nd in penalty kill, and they surrender the fewest shots in the NHL, and that has to do with their forechecking and also some of the shot blocking and defensive structure in their own end. In terms of forwards, Sebastian Aho just had another fantastic year. He's one of the best centers in the NHL. He had 9 game-winning goals, so that's toward the top of the NHL. But really, for me, it was Martin Necas who was instrumental in helping this team win the division. Just a very clutch player, made some fantastic plays. That's going to be really important because this team is missing Andrei Svechnikov and Max Pacioretty. So having him bounce back after a down year last year, I think that's huge. And also the defensemen, the offensive contributions from Brady Shea and Brent Burns, 36 goals between the two of them as the Hurricanes were in the top 5 in goals from their defensemen. And don't forget Jacob Slavin, as great of a defenseman as he is in his own end, He actually led the Hurricanes in scoring in their first round victory against the Bruins last postseason. For the Islanders, one thing that jumped out at me was that they were only 15.8% on the power play, which is kind of strange considering they traded for Bo Horvat at the trade deadline. He has just one power play goal since coming over from Vancouver. Ilya Sorokin, though, if they have to win a series, it's going to be with their goaltending. He's been magnificent, no surprise. Third in the NHL in save percentage and first in shutouts. I definitely want to note their fourth line of Cal Clutterbuck, Matt Martin, and Casey Cizikas because they're a very physical group, and Carolina, they do get a little bit frustrated out there. I have noticed that in their past couple of series against like the Rangers and against the Tampa Bay Lightning, when they're going up against those great goaltenders and can't find the back of the net, they do some stupid things that get a little frustrated out there. So this line for the Islanders could be instrumental in kind of wearing Carolina down through the series. And let's also take note of Noah Dobson's performance this year. 13 goals and 36 assists for the young defenseman. Also added 5 goals and 14 assists on the power play. Now in the regular season, the Hurricanes won 3 out of 4 games. They outscored New York 12-9. Sebastian Aho had 3 goals in 3 games, and Brock Nelson had 3 goals in 4 games for New York. Now, a couple other players to watch for. First of all, for the Hurricanes, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, another player kind of like Necas, who he needs to keep things up at this level if he wants to help the Hurricanes generate enough offense, even though they're a great defensive team. In his last 16 games, he had 6 goals and 7 assists, about 15 and a half minutes of time on ice per game. So he really did play well down the stretch. And as for the Islanders, I picked Jean-Gabriel Pageau. He's really provided some clutch scoring, and just I love the intensity that he plays with. And down the stretch this year, he was also excellent with 3 goals and 10 assists in his last 17 games. A couple of injuries to take note of course, Svechnikov and Pacioretty for Carolina. And as for the Islanders, Matthew Barzal has been out for a while. He's expected to return for Game 1, which is fantastic for them. Alexander Romanov will miss the start of the playoffs, and of course, Oliver Wahlstrom won't be playing at all. Our other matchup in the Metropolitan Division is the New Jersey Devils versus the New York Rangers. The Devils are making their first playoff appearance in 5 years, and they really overshot expectations this season. They kind of remind me of the Avalanche from last year and how they're able to pressure opponents in their zone. And that's not just coming from the third and fourth liners, that's from the top producers, guys like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, and Jesper Bratt. Dougie Hamilton on defense, a fantastic season, and that defensive core overall has been very good, as they were tied for 7th in fewest goals allowed and 5th fewest shots allowed. But Dougie Hamilton, a Norris Trophy caliber season, perhaps he could be a finalist. But yeah, just a great two-way player there. And Vitek Vanacek is somebody I've always really liked because he's never expected to be the number 1 starter, but he's always had to come in and play more games and have a bigger role. He did great for them this year, and even though he's not going to win the Vezina Trophy, this could be an example of how, kind of like the Avalanche, they didn't need a Vezina caliber goaltender to help take them deep, especially when they're able to hold on to the puck so well and allow very few shots against. Now let's talk about the Rangers. Now I mentioned Vanacek. On the other side of things for the Rangers, it's Igor Shesterkin. Now, he didn't have the best season. It wasn't quite the Vezina caliber season from last year when he won that award, but in his last 12 games, he allowed only 21 goals, so less than 2 per game. He had a .944 save percentage, and he had 2 shutouts. This is a very lethal power play. They only added to it at the trade deadline with great veterans like Patrick Kane, of course, future Hall of Famer, and Vladimir Tarasenko to go with the likes of Mika Zibanejad, who was toward the top in power play goals in the NHL. You also have the breadman, Artemi Panarin, to help facilitate things from the dots. And you got Adam Fox from the point too. And lastly, let's talk about that kid line, right? Philip Hedl, Kaapo Kakko, and Alexis Lafreniere. They played in the playoffs last year as a third line for New York. They had some flashes of brilliance, certainly, but this season they really did put things together with 55 combined goals and 68 assists. I'm not sure if they'll get more of a role in the postseason than they did last year, but if that's your third line, not to mention some of the defensive specialists they have on the fourth line, this is a very deep Rangers forward group. Now for the regular season series, the Devils won twice in regulation. Each team won a game in overtime, with the Devils outscoring the Rangers overall 14-11. In those games, Jack Hughes had 4 goals and 2 assists for New Jersey, and for New York, Keandre Miller, the defenseman, led the Rangers in scoring with 5 assists. A couple other players to watch out there. Adam Fox, I did mention him for the Rangers earlier on. 12 goals, 60 assists, some amazing plays this season, and I think he should be a Norris Trophy finalist. And as for the Devils, hey, it's my guy, Timo Meier, Timo time, coming over from the Sharks. 5 goals in his last 8 games, 3 of which are on the power play to go along with 3 assists. And certainly he can be a good big body out there. He can certainly be a physical player that can wear opponents down, and he plays with pretty good speed too. And for injuries, both the Devils and the Rangers are fairly healthy. Michael McLeod missed the last game for the Devils, but he could be back for game 1. Now let's go to the Western Conference side of things, starting with the Pacific Quadrant. We've got the Vegas Golden Knights' best Western Conference record this year up against the second wild card, and that's the Winnipeg Jets. Now, both of these teams aren't particularly elite in any one major statistical category, but I was watching Vegas against the Seattle Kraken, we'll talk about them pretty soon, last night, and Vegas is just so well structured. I really kind of saw that carry over from Bruce Cassidy's time with the Boston Bruins, that they don't really make too many mistakes. They don't take a lot of penalties out there. They sit back and just kind of observe what their opponent does and counters very strongly. That system really paid off for them this year with all the injuries that they faced, especially Mark Stone, but who knows, he could actually come back for this series. But of course, Jack Eichel largely picked them up this year with 27 goals and 39 assists in 67 games. It's his first postseason as well, so I'm sure he's going to be chomping at the bit. They have a very well-rounded defensive core with the likes of Alex Pietrangelo. He captained the Blues to their Stanley Cup. Shea Theodore, a great two-way defenseman. Alec Martinez led the NHL in block shots. And that's great considering we don't know exactly what they're going to have for their goaltending. They've had all sorts of injuries in that position. We don't know who's going to be the tandem for them. Although Laurent Brossoit could be one of them. I saw him last night in that game against the Kraken, and he was fantastic. You also have Logan Thompson, who at one point could have been in the Calder Trophy race for the best rookie. And lastly, the Knights, they are 38-5-3 when they score first. That is the second best mark in the NHL. So you gotta put the first one on the board if you're playing them. Now let's get to the Winnipeg Jets. They are coached by Rick Bowness, who took the Dallas Stars to the Stanley Cup final in 2020. They had their struggles in the second half, but they did finish strongly, winning 5 of their last 7. They only gave up 13 goals in that span. Of course, Connor Hellebuck is a big piece of that. He could be in the Vezina Trophy conversation. He allowed just 27 goals in his last 14 games, so not even 2 per game, a .929 save percentage. Josh Morrissey on defense, he is their best offensive weapon. 16 goals, 60 assists if we're talking about the Norris Trophy candidates. In the season series, the Golden Knights won all 3 games. They came before 2023 though, so do take that of note. Twice they prevailed in regulation. They also won once in overtime, outscoring Winnipeg overall 13-8. Chandler Stevenson for the Knights had a goal and 4 assists, although Jack Eichel in just 2 of those 3 games had 3 goals and an assist. Mark Scheifele led the Jets with 3 goals. Couple players to watch. Chandler Stevenson, I talked about Vegas' structure earlier. I think he's just a shining example of it. He's always in the right position, and he's just been kind of under the radar. 16 goals, 49 assists on the year. Great 5-on-5 possession metrics, 58% in the faceoff circle. I really do think that the numbers here justify how great of a player he is. He's also won a Stanley Cup before with Washington. And for the Jets, let's talk about Nikolai Ehlers. He missed a lot of this season, but he finished great down the stretch. 7 goals and 9 assists in his last 18 games. That's going to be really important in terms of giving the Jets a more dynamic option on offense, somebody with some more speed who can open up the transition game, that sort of thing. In terms of injuries, Vegas still has their ailments out there. William Carrier, he's been out for a long time. I don't think he's going to play. I think Zach Whitecloud should come back into the lineup at least at some point, and Mark Stone is practicing, so that's very promising. On the Jets side of things, Cole Perfetti's been out for almost 2 months, which sucks. It's his rookie year, and he was doing pretty well for them. Also, Sam Gagner's been out for a while. I'm not sure if Perfetti's going to come back, but if he does, that'd be huge for them in terms of giving them some more scoring depth. As for the other matchup in the Pacific, we've got the Edmonton Oilers against the Los Angeles Kings. Now, the Oilers come in scorching hot, a regulation record of 45-23. That is the second best record in the NHL. 1 regulation lost in just their last 15 games. Of course, we know about McDavid and Draisaitl and their fantastic season, but the Oilers as a whole had the best power play in NHL history, and it could be a great weapon in the postseason with Evander Kane back in the lineup and contributing. You got Zach Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, I think had 36 or 37 goals, so they have more than just 97 and 29 out there. And while not Vezina caliber, kind of like Vitek Vanacek, Stuart Skinner has been a good number 1 option for them this year. It was just his first full season. .913 save percentage, 2.75 goals against average. And although Mike Smith last year had very similar numbers, I can at least trust Stuart Skinner more when it comes to handling the puck. As for the LA Kings, I would say that if you haven't followed the NHL all that much the last couple of years, you'd be kind of surprised at how many weapons the Kings have on their team. They actually had the 3rd best power play in the NHL this year. Now, part of that is because they have a couple of good facilitators from their blue line in the likes of Drew Doughty and you have Sean Dursey, who had to fill in for Doughty in last year's postseason. And with a healthy Kevin Fiala, that should make their attack more deadly at even strength. Now, Fiala had 23 goals and 49 assists in 69 games, but last year with the Minnesota Wild, he had 27 goals even strength. And to finish things off, pun intended, Jonas Korpisalo, since the trade deadline, since coming over from the Blue Jackets, he was like the worst goaltender in the NHL last year, but coming to LA, he's been lights out practically. 11 games played, a .921 save percentage, a 2.13 goals against average. These teams were 2-2 against each other this year, with the Kings winning the first 2 games, the Oilers winning the last 2 games. The Kings had the advantage in goal differential, 10-9. A couple players to watch here. For the Oilers, I chose Evan Bouchard. He's been looking like the Bouchard I expected all season long. Really liked his performance in the postseason, at least in terms of quarterbacking the power play. But down the stretch, in 19 games, his final 19, 5 goals and 14 assists, so a point per game. On the Kings side of things, Victor Arvidsson, a very good bounce back year for him. 26 goals, 33 assists. It's been a while since we got to see him really shine in the postseason, but he's had several clutch moments in previous postseasons, so maybe he still has some tricks up his sleeve there. Now, in terms of injuries, Edmonton is mostly healthy, and so are the Kings, except for maybe Gabe Vilardi. He's been out for a few weeks, but I saw that he's only day-to-day, so I would think he comes back at least at some point in this series. And for the final quadrant, we have the Central Division. So we start with the Colorado Avalanche versus the Seattle Kraken. So the Avalanche, Alexander Georgiev, man, I doubted this guy a ton heading into this year, but he's been lights out. He could be in the Vezina Trophy conversation. He played 61 games for the Avs, had a .919 save percentage, a 2.52 goals against average, 5 shutouts. That's second best in the NHL. Now, of course, they're going to still be missing a couple players, a couple key players, I would say, especially Gabriel Landeskog. He's been out the entire year, was excellent for them all season last year and in the postseason, especially in the final. They've missed Josh Manson for a long time, who scored some clutch goals. Cale Makar has missed the last couple of games. And you also have Darren Helm, don't forget him. He was a great fourth liner for them last year. Now, despite having some players out, the Avalanche still have a number of weapons. Their defense surprisingly contributed quite a bit offensively this year. Even if you take Makar out of the equation, you still had 48 points from Devon Toews. He's a number 1 defenseman on most NHL teams, I would think. 36 points from Sam Girard. Great to see him play a full season. You had 24 points from Bowen Byram in just 41 games. He was really good for them in the postseason last year. And of course, if Manson comes back, you could get some clutch scoring out of him. Now let's get to this team right here, the Seattle Kraken. So 40 goals from Jared McCann on the top line this year. Absolutely breakthrough performance from him. Matty Beniers centering that line, certainly in that conversation for the Calder Trophy as the top rookie. You also have Jordan Eberle out there as well. Seattle had 13 players with at least 33 points. I think that makes them the deepest team in the NHL from that perspective. Defenseman Vince Dunn had a breakout year with 64 points, and you also had great contributions from the likes of Daniel Sprong, Alexander Wenberg, and Oliver Bjorkstrand, to name a few players. But I am curious to see how the goaltenders perform, because statistically, they're not the best. Philip Grubauer did perform a little bit better down the stretch, but he is a far cry from what he was with the Avalanche. And as for Martin Jones, despite being great when he first came in, he did falter pretty quickly after that. Both goaltenders do have good postseason numbers, though. When it came to the season series, you might be surprised. The Kraken actually had the upper hand here. So they won once in regulation, they won once in overtime, and as for the Avalanche, they won once in a shootout. Seattle outscored Colorado 7-6. Valeri Nichushkin had 3 goals, no assists for Colorado, and Jaden Schwartz had a goal and 3 assists for Seattle, but he only played in 2 of the 3 games. A couple players to watch here, and of course I could talk about McKinnon and Rantanen, but I do want to zero in on Valeri Nichushkin, especially since Landeskog has been out for the whole year, because he has come a long way over the past couple of seasons with his offense. In 52 games this year, he had 17 goals and 30 assists, and he's defensively excellent. JT Compher does get a nod as well for his performance at both ends of the ice. I think Elliot Friedman recently said that he should be in Selke Trophy consideration. He did have to play a bigger role this season for Colorado. As for Seattle, Yanni Gourde, he's a great pick here. He can do a little bit of everything. He's won 2 Stanley Cups with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He had 14 goals this year, 34 assists, a 65-27 takeaway to giveaway ratio, which is very strong, especially if he's playing that center position, and he can certainly get under his opponent's skin. He's an agitator out there, so whatever role you want him in, he can thrive. I already talked about the Avs injury situation a little bit here. Don't forget Andrew Cogliano. He's another player who's been a little bit banged up and is important for their penalty kill. Andre Burakovsky, the former Av, He's on Seattle now, and he's been out. He'll be out for a couple weeks still. We're about to get into that final matchup, but don't forget to stick around to the end of this video for more details on that giveaway that I talked about earlier. So here we have the Dallas Stars and the Minnesota Wild. Now for the Dallas Stars, they got the secondary scoring. It's not just a one-line team, as elite as they can be, but Jamie Benn, what a turnaround this season. Tyler Seguin, he was a good contributor as well. Mason Marchment, if he's 100%, I know he had that crazy goal-scoring drought, but I like him as a two-way forward quite a bit. You have Max Domi they brought in at the trade deadline. Wyatt Johnston, he should be in that Calder Trophy mix, I would think, with 24 goals on the year. You also have Tyler Dellandrea to add some more depth scoring out of the young forwards out there. I could praise Dallas's top line quite a bit, but I will talk about the power play overall. It was a top 5 power play in the NHL, and of course, those top line players are a part of it. Jason Robertson led them with 13 goals and 28 assists on the man advantage. And lastly, I got to highlight Jake Ottinger. He's had a great year, and he nearly single-handedly won that series against the Calgary Flames last year, a very talented Flames team back then. But anyway, in that series, he had a .954 save percentage, a 1.81 goals against average, and he had a really great first full season as a starter in the NHL. As for the Minnesota Wild now, they were kind of middling at first to start this year. They trade for Ryan Reeves, right, the big enforcer, and they go 37, 18, and 8. That's pretty telling. Like some other teams that I mentioned earlier, I am intrigued to see what the Wild do with their goaltending. So Marc-Andre Fleury, in his last 12 games, he let in 30 goals, but he had a .924 save percentage, so that's very good. But Philip Gustafsson, man, what a season he's had, coming out of nowhere seemingly. His last 19 games, he only gave up 36 goals, so less than 2 a game, with a .940 save percentage. Now, if I'm Coach Dean Evison, I'm learning from last year's mistake. They should have started Talbot over Fleury, because he played better down the stretch, and I would say the same thing here. Start Philip Gustafsson, maybe give him a short leash. But one sort of shortcoming with the Wild is their even strength scoring. They were just 29th in the NHL this year. I talked about Fiala earlier, who was playing for them last year, 27 even strength goals. So they're going to need more out of some of their bigger name players, like Ryan Hartman. He had 38 goals total last season, so they'll need some more out of him. Another guy, Matt Zuccarello, he's had a good year, but I hope that he can step up even further. Now for the season series, Dallas won twice. Those came in regulation. Minnesota won twice, but that was in a shootout. Dallas outscored Minnesota overall 14-10. Rope Hintz for the Stars, 4 goals and 3 assists. Kirill Kaprizov, 2 goals and 1 assist. A couple players to watch here. Don't worry, Stars fans. I did not leave out Miro Heiskanen. He had an amazing season. He's always a really good defenseman, right? But offensively this year, he had 11 goals, 62 assists, just very reliable in distributing the puck, I believe. And he could be in that Norris Trophy conversation. And at the other end of things, you got Matt Boldy for the Wild. He's a star in the making. He's already a star. Let's just say that. 31 goals, 32 assists. Part of that really good power play with 8 goals and 18 assists on the man advantage. And he was even better toward the end of the season. In his last 20 games, 15 goals and 8 assists. Now, the Stars are mostly healthy going into the postseason, whereas the Wild will be missing a key piece in Joel Eriksson Ek. He's a great two-way center for this team. He's got a big body, too, so he can play a little physical, work his way around the boards. He's going to be out for at least the start of the playoffs, and he's had good playoffs in previous seasons, too. Mason Shaw, of course, had his ACL injury, so he's not playing. We'll see about Oscar Sundqvist as well. All right, guys, time to get into that giveaway. But before we do, leave a thumbs up and share this video out there with anybody else who is just kind of tuning into the NHL and could use some good preparation before the playoffs begin. And comment down below who's your Stanley Cup favorite and who is your dark horse or sleeper team. All right, now time for this giveaway. We've got 2 of them. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. So the first giveaway, sign up for my NHL.com bracket challenge. There's a link in the pinned comment down below. It's free to sign up. You can fill out your bracket, but do so before the playoffs start. The person with the highest score at the end of the playoffs will get a $50 Cool Hockey gift card. And if there's a tie for any reason, I'll be sure that all of our winners are rewarded. Now, in the past, Cool Hockey has actually had a couple of great sales in the postseason. So who knows, you could actually pair that with this $50 off. And they ship to the US and Canada for free, so you don't have to worry about that. And once the playoffs are over, I will announce the winner of our bracket challenge through our community tab. All right, and as for giveaway number 2, so if you tap join below and become a Twisted Wrister member of either tier, you are eligible for our members only bracket challenge, and you'll have a chance to win an Adidas NHL jersey, NHL licensed, of your choice, your team. I'm not going to tell you the odds, but the chances of winning a jersey are actually a lot greater than winning that $50 Cool Hockey gift card. So that's a good incentive to join there. So first of all, complete your membership by tapping join and choosing a membership level. You can choose either one, and you'll be able to see most of the membership benefits. Then after that, see the community tab, which is on my channel's homepage. I already published a post with a link to our members only bracket challenge. Your bracket doesn't have to be the same as the one that's open to everybody. So in other words, you can pick different teams if you want. That's completely fine. Here's what the highest score will win. So first of all, an Adidas NHL jersey of your choice or team of your choice, a 1-hour video call with me where we can talk about hockey or anything else that's on your mind as long as it's appropriate. If you want me to do like a shout out for somebody's birthday or something like that, we can make that work. I'll also give you a Twisted Wrister hockey t-shirt, and if you want me to recolor my logo for your favorite team, we can do that. Maybe even give you a different shirt color if you prefer. And same thing as earlier, I'll notify the winner through our community tab once the playoffs are over. And by becoming a member, you'll gain instant access to our member benefits, including the live streams that we've run in the past. And if you're an MVP, the 25 plus videos I've made for that exclusive group of supporters. All right, that's going to do it for our 2023 Stanley Cup Playoffs preview. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Leave a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe if you're new here and want to hang out with us during the playoffs. We've got 2 great months of hockey ahead of us. It's going to be such a freaking fun time. I hope you're excited for this one. And again, enter our giveaways, become a member. You'll get instant content and you'll have a chance at winning a jersey of your choice. All right, guys, have a great one out there. I'll see you around for more playoff coverage.